Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today, absolutely delighted to be joined. We haven't spoken for a long time, so it's really good to catch up and see him again. It's David Cooney from MahiFX. David, how are you?
G'day, how you going?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, really good. Good to see you.
You too.
Good to see the business doing well. You've said how busy it all is at the moment, and
Yes,
I always love hearing that as we lurch towards Christmas. It seems to be just hotting up for everyone at the moment, doesn't it? But tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll go into all of that. We'll go into the story of the the business and where you've come from, and a little bit about what's happening in the marketplace at the moment. But before we do that, can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself and MahiFX and the story so far?
Yeah, so sort of did my time in banking, and came out of a reasonable amount of experience and a wife, and then Susan, my wife, and I co-founded Mahi. Susan was running much of the sales stuff in parallel with the trading side of the business at Barcap that we did, sort of the EFX development, the product Barks, and it became evident to us that banking was going to become it was going to have its challenges around 2010. You didn't need to be a particularly talented analyst to see that stuff. And also, I had done my time at that stage, and it was something I wanted to do was go out and build our own business. So we left and we started doing that. And the idea was to take the things that we'd learned about having machines make prices and manage risk and so on, initially in EFX, although we've extended into other product classes subsequently, and then license that technology to people so that we could sit as close to the source of origination as possible. So there are people around who've got far greater expertise than we do in originating business. I'm thinking particularly of the retail brokers, right? But in many cases done extraordinary jobs of building massive amounts of flow, in many cases flow that dwarfs that seen by a lot of the banks. And the idea really was that we would provide our technology to then price and risk manage alongside those guys, their flow in a way which was the price would be appropriate to their business, rather than being an aggregation, prices that were appropriate to the LP's businesses, and where we could to risk manage rather than have a book, which I think is obviously a little inefficient because you're constantly passing out all the spread. And on the other side, a little bit more responsible and controlled perhaps than unbridled, unconstrained B-book. So it seemed to us that if we had the technology to do all the pricing and risk management and could then embed it in businesses that had the flow, it's kind of symbiotic kind of setup. And so that's what we do. And, in the course of doing that, obviously we need a bunch of analytic capability to understand what it is that we're facing and how it is that we optimize all the, different bits of the business to make our partners as much money as we can.
It seems to be working all right for you so far.
Yeah, it's keeping us busy.
And it's been fun because we both launched businesses at a similar sort of time, which was sort of still in the weeds of the 2008 crisis. This one comes up and has probably been a different set of challenges as well. What are the two main differences for you in what you're seeing and how have you responded to it?
Well, we were still at Barclays through to 2010, end of 2010. So when we were in the 2008 period, that was at Barclays, and one of the differences there was the market impact of the GFC and foreign exchange, as I remember it anyway, was there were some really big event days. I remember Bear Stearns falling over, and it was a huge day, and then Lehman's, and that was a huge day, and all that kind of thing. But in between times, it was much more BAU. Right? The settings of the machines would go back to about normal and all that kind of thing. It would kind of motor on and whatnot. Whereas, that period during March and April was just sustained noise.
Yeah.
And, that put a massive premium, I think, on the one hand, on the machines themselves being adaptive, being able to cope with different conditions. Anything rigid was possibly being exposed. But on the other hand, spreads blew out so much that it was kind of happy days for a lot of people. And where it became difficult was actually I don't know if you need to say this, but sort of we got a bit used to what was going on, and market conditions normalised a little bit, and spreads came in. Again, like spreads are great compensators for inefficiency. And then as those spreads come in, those inefficiencies are exposed. And so the first couple of months of the whole thing seemed pretty good for most of the people that we deal with. And then it got a bit more challenging.
Mm.
You know, one of the challenging things is always unanticipated news.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you get like a sort of, it's temporary, say, but who knows how long it lasts, it's some sort of state change. And so unless the pricing regimes and whatever have adaptive characteristic in them that can cope with that state change, you're going to be pricing things wrong. And you know, that can be kind of challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, so you had so many announcements, so many bits of news coming out and whatever, that there was just this constant sort of stuff lurching around all over the place. And, you know, the pricing wasn't easy. And so where there were inefficiencies in pricing, it has been, I think, exposed over the last 6 months, possibly over the last 3 months particularly, which, you know, it helps us in some ways, right? Because it makes people think, well, perhaps the regime that I've been using today to, you know, in some cases, just aggregating other people's liquidity and using that as a price source is not as good as it could be. Maybe leaving me with some vulnerabilities, and the conditions have kind of exposed that to be true.
Which creates, again, you know, opportunities abound. I know one of the things that you guys have been looking at is to sort of drive the I guess the accessibility, the knowledge of what's happening in the marketplace and the opportunities that are out there for people in it. Technology's come in, and I think, in your own words, been a sort of bit of a double-edged sword for the markets, and the game's certainly been shifting and changing a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen, and where opportunities are lying for this, because it's a completely different vista now, isn't it? And you know, if you play it right, there's great opportunities. If you play it wrong, you know, it's game changing in a completely different way as well, by the same rationale. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts and what you're seeing there.
Well, you know, we always thought that, you know, one of the ways we framed our thinking about this stuff is that if we had two computers, one of which was randomly making a two-way price and another computer which was randomly trading on that two-way price, over time all the money would go from the consumer of liquidity to the producer, because the oscillations would cancel out and this guy would be left with a spread. But, you know, and in the very early days of EFX, you know, there were plenty of counterparties, plenty of customers where that was kind of the nature of it. Right? So they wanted to buy a machine tool from Germany or whatever, and they kind of clicked on the button and the trade was done and everybody moved on. Now, the moment that the consumer of liquidity has two producers who are making prices, and the moment we'll assume that they're oblivious to each other, you'll get constant arbitrages between those guys because they'll pitch their rates wherever they want, right? Independent of knowing where the other guy is. Now, the consumer can just sit there and arbitrage these two guys all day long. So over time, the money will go from the producers of the prices to the consumers. And so, you know, the rise of the aggregators, people being able to wire up to multiple liquidity providers at once, that's the structure that occurred, right? And so you started out with, you know, model trading funds and stuff who are essentially, and fair play, you know, like trading those arbitrages. Mm-hmm. But it was expensive to do that, right? Comparatively inefficient. You know, you probably had to have a PB, which was a barrier to entry and all that kind of thing. Well, now anybody can do it. You know, spreads have compressed so much amongst the retail community. Leverage is so high that it's possible for somebody, you know, sitting in their mother's basement who knows a bit of Python to connect up with a bunch of retail brokers and replicate exactly their situation and have the machine trade those arbitrages all day long. And they do.
Yeah. And
so, you know, the concept that you know, all retail, you know, traders lose, in aggregate, it's still true. But there's plenty of them who don't, and there's plenty of them who systemically are taking money out of the system. And so, you know, it reminds me a little bit of blackjack in casinos. You know, you've got an intrinsic vulnerability that you need to monitor for and address.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's obviously no such thing as simultaneous and speed of light issues and all that kind of thing. You need to throttle rates and stuff. So this issue is not going to go away. But you need to make it as good as you possibly can, right? You need to make sure that in any arbitrage situation, you would hope that you'd be the guy who is on the strong side of the rope rather than the weak. If you are the weak, week on week, you're going to find more and more people sniffing you out because it's pretty easy for these guys to profile and it's pretty easy for them to exploit.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues. And then there are others, which is that, you're seeing syndicates of guys ganging up, positioning brokers, and then trading in what is quite remarkable size in many cases for effect, to push the prices to different places. And, that's a tough one, because if you're forming a rate of, N number of LPs who don't have the information about this flow, and this flow is actually taking place in the broker community before it hits the sort of ECNs, well, obviously their price doesn't incorporate the information about all this flow, which is starting to hit the market and is designed to have an effect. Then, there will be some leakage and the information will get out and the price will reset. And that's part of the purpose of these guys who are doing these trades, right? And look at it, crack get a result. But at this point, it's the brokers who are left holding the baby.
Yeah.
Because they've substantiated rates that were good, they're a top of book rate that works in some amount, not a lot, and put up a lot at that top of book rate, and then have the compounding problem of them, people who are trading, wanting to move the price. Doing so, the money has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the B-book brokers.
Yeah.
It can be very expensive.
And so the piece for them is to make sure that they're dealing with these challenges and they're maintaining that sort of equilibrium. So this comes down to a winning and losing sort of scenario. Where's the better position for the wider market for it to be? I
sort of think that dealing with the people ganging up and trading with a broker at the same time, that, as the English would say, that doesn't seem cricket. Not very sporting, you've got a piece of information which you're looking to exploit. The market maker has got sort of implicit assumption that it's going to be clean-ish business, it's going to be top of book amounts and so on. Now, if you do this with any frequency, you'll find yourself barred or blacklisted. The problem, of course, these guys then, re-emerge, open an account in a different name or different whatever, have their sister or cousin or whatever open another account and rinse and repeat. So it's an ongoing problem. I think the best protection to it is to identify the trading pattern as close to real time as you can, and then have a technological response to it.
Yeah.
Because, dance out of the way of it.
Yeah. So you're there, and as we were speaking about, and I find this sort of fascinating, is look in peacetime, everyone sort of ignores the sort of leakages and or the opportunity, and we were talking about sort of the whole change curve, and change happens because either it hurts too much or because the reward is big enough for that to come through. Reward often isn't enough of a motivator for people to break that status quo, and I think by nature we humans are relatively conservative in what we go after. Tell me a little bit about how you've seen commercial decision making around accelerating technology growth happening over the course of this period, and is that set to stay?
Well, one of the things, sunlight disinfectant sort of thing, one of the things that's helpful is to take data sets and go, look, within this portfolio of business, it's probable that there are different classes of business, right? Trivial thing to say, but then we run it through and we look at it and divide it into a number of classes of business, I guess you'd call it. And so broadly, you've got stuff which is going offside so fast, is carrying so much information that you really don't want to be taking the other side of the trade. There's a little bit of a problem with that, in that the only alternative, well, there are two alternatives really for you. You can either decline the business, or you can pass it through to one of your LPs. Unlikely to get you on their Christmas card list, right? And if you're knowingly passing through bad business and putting your name to it, there's going to be some sort of consequence to that.
Yeah.
Which is that now it's going to be you as the broker who's going to see your pricing widen from that liquidity provider. Probably the enlightened thing to do is say to the liquidity provider, I've got some stuff which doesn't look terribly nice. It may be that you want to put that down a secondary or ECN feed, no tiers feed, right? Just so we're clear about the nature of this flow. I can't vouch for it. I can't handle it. If you want to have a go at it, fair play. So, you do end up with some amount of that kind of business, and it's clear that the proportion of that business is growing. There's more and more of it. It's because the retail traders are availing themselves of the technology to get the edge on the market makers with greater consistency and frequency, therefore volume, than they have done in the past. Right? So there's that stuff. Then there is stuff which is carrying a decent amount of information, but leaves a monetizable window. So that'll be the stuff with the yield profile where there's, positive inception generally, but there's, some sort of decay to it because it's carrying some sort of information, and on average, that manifests with a bit of time, but it will consistently go through zero. Some shortish run. And I'm talking there about these sort of, 30-second, 2-minute kind of territory, right? So a lot of that stuff will go on to decay really, really badly. And so if it's sitting in the B book, that's where the money's coming from the B book. Right. So that stuff can probably be best dealt with by having hedging regimes that keep the holding periods comparatively short, in the positive side of the yield profile. So there's that class of business. And then what you're left with after cleansing those two bits out, is some stuff which has got really benign characteristics and can quite happily be B-booked. It's not to say that you would necessarily want to run it with no bounds. It seems to me sensible to do some amount of hedging just to take the boundaries off the risk and whatever. But at least you've got positive expectation in that book to deal with. And then it's just a utility decision about how much variation in P&L and all the rest of it you want. Right?
Yeah.
Now, the best way to answer that question is to run simulations on it and go, okay, look, you can configure hedges like this, and this would be what proportion of the business would be hedged, and that would be the risk that would result, and that would be the P&L vol. So if you are going to ask people to add dimensions to their business, right, hedging some amount of the B book, I think it's totally fair that you have technology to show them exactly what it looks like and allow them to choose from whatever bit they like of the options. Because ultimately, it's a utility decision. To me, that those bits all end up adding some value. So you've got identification of really adverse stuff, which is coming about because of the democratization of tech, right, which is allowing the consumers to expose weakness in pricing. They can accumulate cash really, really fast, right, and become very powerful trading presences in and of themselves. Then there's value in the sense of like taking away bad things by identifying that flow and finding an alternative way of dealing with it. There is value in identifying the stuff which is decaying reasonably quickly and then having a different hedging regime for that, which is designed to shorten holding periods. That's got value. And then I think there's value in managing the boundaries of the B book risk, right? Because you can, by just hedging a little bit of it, transform the amount of risk you run. Loads of situations where by hedging somewhere between, say, 10 and 15% of the overall book, we will take the mean risk, the average amount of risk in the portfolio, to somewhere between 1/10 and 1/20th, which of course, and we do that hedging really efficiently, so it's not expensive. Well, that just explodes the Sharpe ratio. And it
exactly,
seems all other things being equal, that must make the business more valuable.
Yeah. And that's that comes down to this. If you're talking heaven and hell, there's the heaven right there, isn't it? In what moves markets and influences buying decisions and gets people to make those things. Hence, seeing the business that you're talking about at the start of the show, the top of the show as well. You mentioned there the weaknesses and dive into that a little bit more. Tell us about what that means.
So one of the ways of creating a top of book rate to publish to your clients is to do a lot of aggregation.
Yeah.
right? And it seems like there's a pretty good payoff to that. If you get variation and skew, then you're going to end up with a tighter aggregate amount or tighter mean spread, book spread. The issue is when the prices change, right? Because if I've got two highly performant LPs that I've got great relationships with, the rates will change because there's been somebody doing a sweep in the market, say, or a bit of news release, whatever it is, and they will respond very, very fast, which means that the top of book rate that I'm publishing to my clients will change very fast, which means that any of those guys, using their tech to try and pick you off on the turn of the price have either a super limited window in which to do so, or you will have changed the rate within the last look window and be able to go, oh, look, I see what you're doing. No, thanks. Right? If I've got 20 LPs, I'm now going to have a delay as those guys work through their processing of the change. They'll be at different stages in their throttles. Their infrastructure will have different quality to it and whatever. And so I'm just guaranteed that the change, the top of book, is much later to change. Some people aggregate aggregators, and that just guarantees that the evolution of the rate is really, really slow. And so you didn't used to get as many jagged steps in pricing. Now you do, and those things, because when people trade, I think there's some element of spread being crossed and some amount of information being transmitted. The ubiquitousness of aggregators means that so much of the business is being done through sweeps. That's a lot of information being transmitted in just one discrete chunk, and that causes the market to step, which means that the gap between the previous bid and the new offer, say, it's an opportunity. If I can sell on the old bid and it's offered lower, and that's an arb, latency arb, they happen more and more and more. If I have baked into my price formation delays because it's hyper aggregated, you can guarantee I'm going to be putting temptation in front of people, and you can guarantee they're going to be sniffing that out, and you can guarantee they're going to be sniping at it. And the ones they get are going to be painful, and they're going to build up because there are so many opportunities per per hour. They just sit there and trade those back and forwards, and that's a viable thing to do.
So you've landed yourself in an interesting spot.
Well, I think it's been going on for a long time, right? We were faced with all this kind of stuff back in the banks and whatever. But at that time, I think the spreads in retail were wide enough to just conceal all the stuff. You couldn't really exploit it, because when you had 3 pip spreads and whatever, just too hard. Now, when many places ignoring commissions and stuff, you'll see Eurodollar being choice for about 5/6 of the time. Well, the moment it moves, is any delay, there's an opportunity. And competitive pressures mean that a lot of BBIT guys are really reluctant to slip or reject. If you don't do either of those two, defensive things, then you just give money away with each trade. And again, when yields were really, really high, it was kind of maybe okay. I mean, it still doesn't seem efficient, but you could tolerate it. Now the ratios are really changing, sort of week by week. So people are finding, I think, they're doing more and more and more business and making maybe certainly not seeing commensurate revenue growth. In some cases, they'll be doing more. This is a bad outcome, obviously. Doing more and more in business and making less money, and that's because this new predatory stuff which is coming on is actually destroying value. So,
and that's a sort of common theme, isn't it? Of I think these times, as much as anything else, if you get it wrong, you can cycle a lot harder and go slower and less far.
I think particularly in these trading businesses, right? Because it's tech. And so it used to be that trading was clicking. Get RSI after a bit, even if you were presenting opportunities or whatever. Now they're just about big weapons. It's okay. I mean, it's classic sort of poacher gamekeeper stuff. You've then just got to have characteristics in your pricing model that provide you the defense you need.
So we sort of coming now to sort of 10 years of the business since you started it up. Celebrated this year?
Yeah, yeah.
Albeit in different circumstances, I imagine, than anticipated.
Yeah, a little bit more subdued than it might have been. Just given the
Tell me about those 10 years and yeah, some of the sort of highlights of the journey, and then what importantly we can look forward to and expect from the company in 2021.
Yeah, it's one of the starting points is with we wanted to be able to control the culture of the business, and we had the idea and that if we got that right, had a bunch of smart people with a good culture, and were dedicated to what we did, and Mahi means our craft, treating the pricing and risk management stuff as a bit of a craft, that we'd just keep at it, and it would be just an endless sort of study and whatever, and understanding it and getting better at it and all that kind of stuff. It's never static, right? And so that's proven to be the case, and it feels like in some respects, the rate at which we innovate is increased. As in the later stages, in the last couple of years, whatever, than it had previously. A lot of it sort of surfing a little bit of the big data AI type stuff, and being able to research things in different ways, and having more data to deal with and all that kind of stuff. That's exciting.
Definitely.
And each little thing that you learn leads on to another thing, and so on. And then we extend out by analogy into CFDs, into cryptos, and all the rest of it. It's just engaging, it's fun, and you get to work with cool people because you try to get that culture thing right on the way in. So
sounds like a touch of your beloved All Blacks thrown into the mix there, doesn't it? Strong people.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Strong people, strong culture, driving innovation. It sounds like a familiar pathway there.
Yeah, with a little bit of no dickheads in it. Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. We read the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So exciting times. And what comes next?
I think it's just more of the same, really. But you're always striving to do stuff. To talk about perfection, you'll never get there, right? But to get as close as you can, to be the most accurate price, to hedge as efficiently as you possibly can, all those kind of little efficiencies. It's an ongoing challenge, and then you look at other assets, and there's just stuff to be done there as well. And I don't know, we're not going to run out of stuff to do anytime soon.
Sounds exciting. So look, there's people out there who are doubtlessly wading through these sort of problems at the moment, and the sort of things which you guys can fix. Hopefully some of them are watching the show at the moment and saying, do you know what, this resonates with me. What should they be doing? Who should be reaching out to you, and who can you help, and how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, look, anybody who's got a flow business, whether it be FX, CFDs, or cryptos, just give us a shout. And we just start by looking at the trade flow and analysing that to see where it is that we think we can help. We're just super transparent about the whole thing. There've been cases we've looked at flow and like, you don't need us.
Yeah.
As clean as you like. I'm not sure you're going to be able to scale that, but you don't need us at this stage. That's all good. Most of the time, though, we can help and help very significantly. So it's really just a case of going, look, there might be some things going on in my business that not necessarily as good as they could be. And that's fair enough, right? Because, we've spent our time focusing on this side of the business. A lot of brokers are very, very good at originating it. They should just let us have a wee look, and we'll see where we can. We know that there are challenges in the business, right? With latency and dealing not full, and democratization of the technology and people taking advantage of it and all that kind of thing. Just have a wee look, see if there's any of that going on. And if there is, then we just develop protections. It's the same way that a lot of the casinos, I think, outsource their security to people who specialize in that stuff, identifying the card counters and all that kind of thing.
There's a whole nother analogy. I love that, what you were talking about within that of the card counters and the roulette tables being gamed, and putting the right squads into various areas. This is a real problem, right? And
it's
something which
it's analysis, right? This is effectively a betting business in some ways. The language of gambling, or expectation is part of this thing. If the traders have superior information to the market maker, the trader can win.
Yeah.
Whether it's information about latency because they're listening to multiple sources that the that the market maker doesn't have, or whether they know that they're going to be trading for effect. A bunch of them are going to be smacking it at the same time. For example, we have slot and gold in particular. They have a superior bit of information. So really need to have just accept that those things are unavoidable. It's always possible for someone to have better information than you, but it'll manifest, in certain ways, just as people doing basic strategy and card counting, manifest because of the way in which the betting style changes. Need to be incorporating that information. Now, if you're just aggregating other people's prices, you've got information that they don't have.
Yeah.
That's a mismatch, right? Where you are being subject to information being transmitted to you. You've got no protection in the pricing that you're receiving from others because they don't have the information. So the only way of preventing that from happening is for you to take the pricing in-house and be matching the information with the price formation. The only way you can do that is for you to have a pricing engine of your own that allows you to produce the price which is appropriate both to your business and to these particular clients who are trading with your business.
Yeah.
Now, the outsource thing is going to be vulnerable. It just is. That just won't go away. The development of those trading engines is, it's kind of a career. It takes a lot of time and it can be expensive and capex and mistakes and all that kind of thing. So that's where it makes sense, I think, to come talk to us. And then we partner with people who've got the flow to help them produce the rate which is appropriate to the business and to the way in which the clients are trading with them. And of course, one price doesn't fit all. One characteristic of price doesn't fit all. So by having our technology inside of the business, you can craft. The other side of it, for example, is a bunch of our clients now, we produce a much tighter gold price for their retail clients than they get in the aggregate top of book. So for the people who deserve it, you can make better prices and provide better quality of service. It doesn't all have to be defensive.
Yeah.
It's using the technology to produce, the best possible service for the nature of the business, and in that way maximizing the P&L across the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? And that I think there's so much focus on defense that people aren't thinking about on the offensive side at the same sort of time, isn't it? And creating those margins. I think probably 10 years ago you were probably looking, maybe even 5, that you were looking very much about where your advantage could sit. Right now, it's about plugging. For the last 5 years or so, maybe even a bit longer, it's been about plugging gaps and playing on the defense a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
But if you've got,
I think that blend of both is critically important. That's where winning happens, as far as I can see.
You can't just have this sort of reverse Robin Hood thing where you're providing, wider spreads to the deserving, because you need that defence from the people who are trying to have a go.
Yeah.
Just break those in two and provide the best quality service you can to the people who deserve it, because otherwise they're going to migrate to somebody who does.
MahiFX can be at the middle of that. David, how do they get in touch with you?
So just through the website, or the contact details on the website.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it will be well worth it. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm so good to catch up and hear a little bit more about the story. And I think it's a fascinating world that you're working in there, and it's good to see so much good stuff happening, and to hear those magic words that you're busy and rushed off the feet as we lurch towards 2021.
Indeed.
Here's to good times. Thanks so much for sharing the story, David.
Yeah. See you later on.
No problem at all. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks a lot. Cheers.